What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the channel. Today we're doing a reviewer requested video to kind of build on our series of how to have effective different positions in Madden, and today we're talking about the defensive line. And so this might end up being a little bit longer of a video, so if it's not something that's for you, you can feel free to skip ahead and try and find parts of the video that you'll find useful, or come back tomorrow for another video. But this is going to be a little bit of a longer video because there's a lot of stuff to talk about in how to make the defensive line effective, because there is 3-4 defenses, 4-3 defenses, and it's going to depend on exactly what you're going to run. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is the general difference between the 3-4 and the 4-3 and how it's going to play out in Madden. So the first thing that you have to know is that for the most part in Madden, you're really not actually going to be coming out in your 3-4 or 4-3 defense. Now, that's going to be a good defense to run on like first and second down or short yardage situations or whatever. But a lot of the time in Madden, there's a lot of people that like to pass the ball. You're going to be coming out in nickel defenses. And so we are going to talk about later in the video about how that affects things and what really matters for that. And there's differences with that compared to your base defenses. If we're just talking strictly about your base defenses, how do you make a 3-4 defense, your defensive line, work effectively? Let's talk about that first. Now, this is not a good example of what you want to do with a 3-4 defense. The reason being is I have players that are built for a 4-3 defense, and let's talk about why. So in a 3-4 defense, the general idea of it is that your linebackers are what is going to be generating the pressure for you. Oftentimes, you'll be able to get pressure out of your defensive linemen as well, but generally speaking, your outside linebackers are going to be seeking one-on-one matchups with the offensive tackles and trying to beat them to get sacks on the quarterback. And in general, in the run game, your linebackers are going to be, your two middle linebackers are primarily going to be the run stuffers. They're the ones that are going to be tasked with making the tackles. And so what that plays out for is your outside linebackers are going to be holding the edge, and what that boils down to then is that your defensive line, all three of them, are tasked with essentially just eating up space and allowing your middle linebackers to make plays. Now, that's how it works in real football. How does it work in Madden? In Madden, it does work very similarly. If you're running a 3-4 defense and they're trying to run the ball against you, generally speaking, these three aren't going to be super effective unless they're block shedding. Okay, and your middle linebackers are going to be the ones making the plays, and you have to trust your outside linebackers to keep the edge. You just have to have these guys be good enough that they can kind of get a push and drive their offensive lineman back, or at least not get driven back themselves. And so that's the base idea of the 3-4 and how it's going to work for you in Madden. Now, the other thing that you're going to want to consider is if you want these guys to excel further than just being block eaters, how do you get guys that are going to be disruptive in the backfield, and how do you get guys that are going to allow your linebackers to not have as much pressure on them? Okay. The way that you do that is one stat and one stat only, and that is block shedding. If you want these defensive linemen to be effective for you in a 3-4 scheme, you need them to be good at block shedding. Now, there are a couple other factors that run into this, and you're going to have to pay attention to how strong these guys are and how effective they are in terms of like power moves or finesse moves. And the reason being is that if you want these guys to do well against big hulking offensive linemen, you need defensive linemen that are going to be strong and be able to block shed and probably have power moves. And so you're going to look at guys like Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram. Traditionally, they are edge rushers. That's what they're designed to do. They're from a 4-3 scheme, and so they're not really designed to eat up blocks. However, you can utilize them in Madden to disrupt the backfield out of a 3-4 scheme. It's not going to be too much of a trouble for you because they are strong players. And so Joey Bosa has 88 strength. He's got 91 power move, 99 finesse move, but only 75 block shedding. So here's the thing that you're going to want to understand is that he's going to be able to get a push, but he's going to be more of a block eater in the defensive run game because he only has that 75 block shedding. He's not going to be extremely effective in getting off of blocks. And so you're going to have to rely on your linebackers to do more for you. But if you want somebody that is specifically going to excel for you out of the 3-4, you're going to want guys that are more like Deshaun Hand. And so we're going to take a look at his stats real quick, and you're going to look at him and you're going to say, okay, 94 strength and 85 block shedding. He might not have the best power move or finesse move, but he's going to be able to be disruptive as an interior player because of that strength and that block shedding. And so that's, I guess, the main difference is that if you're going to run a 3-4, you're going to want 3 interior defensive linemen, and you're going to want good pass rushers as your linebackers. And so that's kind of where you're going with this, is that you want all 3 of these guys to be good interior linemen. You want them to have good strength, good block shedding, and the next best thing is good power move. And that's not necessarily what I have here. This team is more specialized to a 4-3. So let's go ahead and talk about a 4-3. A 4-3 defense is designed so that your defensive ends are getting the pressure, and that's Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram. And so what that's going to entail is guys that are faster, generally have good finesse moves a lot of the time. And so that's why you see a guy like Bosa, who isn't necessarily going to be great in the run game because he only has 75 block shedding, and he certainly wouldn't be good as a 3-4 defensive end because he has only 75 block shed. He's not going to work well as an interior defensive lineman. You want him to be on the edge because of his skill set and his attributes. His skill set lends itself to being an edge player, and so he is more closely relatable to an outside linebacker in the 3-4 scheme. He's an edge player. Okay. And so if you want your 4-3 defensive line to be effective for you, you're going to want to have 2 defensive tackles that are interior defensive linemen, like I said before, like in the 3-4 scheme where they're like Deshaun Hand. You're going to want to have 2 guys that can block shed and that are strong, because that's going to be what's important for you in excelling in the run game. If you want these guys to be effective, you always want your interior defensive linemen, whether it's a 3-4 scheme or a 4-3 scheme, you want your interior defensive linemen to have good block shedding and good strength. And so in the 4-3 scheme that we're talking about now, you're going to have 2 of these guys. And then these guys are going to be on the edge. And your linebackers, your 3 linebackers that you have, are going to be tasked with roaming behind them and making plays behind them. But for the most part, you're relying on your 4 front defensive linemen to do everything for you. They're going to be holding the edge, the 2 edge players, and then these 2 players are going to be tasked with basically holding blocks in the middle and allowing your other players to roam around and make the tackles for you. So again, like I said, if you want them to excel, you want these 2 interior defensive linemen in the 4-3 scheme to be block shedders and be able to get disruption into the backfield. Now, if you're playing a 4-3 and you want your edge rushers to be effective in Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa, you're going to be looking more towards pass rush moves. And don't get me wrong, the block shedding plays into that, but you can sacrifice on the strength. You can sacrifice a little bit on the block shedding. Don't get me wrong, block shedding is extremely important no matter where you're at on the defensive line. But for the most part, you can sacrifice some of those things to get a bit of a faster player that has good finesse or good power moves. And so what you'll see with Melvin Ingram, he's got 81 speed, more of like a linebacker speed, not really a defensive lineman type of speed. And he's only got 83 strength, which is good, but not as good as most offensive linemen. But you trade that off, and he has that 97 finesse move. And so he's going to be able to beat guys in one-on-one matchups and get to the quarterback. And same thing with Joey Bosa. You sacrifice some stats, like you sacrifice his block shedding, but he's got 99 finesse moves, so he's going to be able to beat guys in one-on-one matchups for the most part. That block shedding will hinder him a little bit, but the finesse move is going to be the main factor that's going to determine whether he gets off or not, off the block or not, and he's going to be able to pressure the quarterback. And so if you want the 4-3 defensive lineman to be effective, make sure that you're doing, make sure that you have them schemed correctly. Don't have 4 Melvin Ingrams or 4 Joey Bosas across your line, because they're going to get eaten up in the run game. You have to know what type of defense you're trying to go for. And so let's kind of go into what most people are going to be running for most of the game, and that's the nickel defense. Well, what's going to be effective effective defensive line-wise in terms of the nickel. You're going to have 4 down linemen, and it's going to either be, whether you're running a 3-4 or a 4-3, it's going to be 2 interior defensive linemen and then 2 edge rushers is essentially what it is. It turns out to be pretty much like a 4-3 defense, except for the personnel behind them is going to be more pass coverage focused. So you'll have more corners on the field, more safeties, depending on which nickel formation or dime or whatever that you're calling. So you're, again, going to want to have 2 good interior defensive linemen, guys that are capable against the run, capable of block shedding. And then your 2 edge guys, you're going to be responsible for rushing the passer in most situations. Sure, you're going to be calling blitzes and whatnot, but if you want them to be successful, if you want to excel as defensive linemen, you're going to need to get guys that are able to do that. And so let me give you a personal example here of what I had to do to actually be more effective with this team. And so I run a 4-3. I run kind of a combo between a 4-3 and a 3-4, and so that's why you see I have 2 middle linebackers here, and it's not showing up as 2D tackles. But previously, I was running a straight-up 3-4, and I didn't have anybody that could really do anything against the run, and I was getting eaten up in the run game, and here's why. Jerry Tillery was my lone interior defensive lineman. Joey Bosa is not good against the run because he's got weak block shedding, and same with Melvin Ingram. And so I was counting on my defensive tackle to get block sheds, and, well, Jerry Tillery's just not very good. He's only a 76 overall. He's got, only 76, 80 power move, 79 block. I mean, he just doesn't have very good stats yet for a defensive lineman. I'll get him there eventually, but he's just not effective enough as a defensive lineman. He's kind of on the verge of being good enough, but I had to bring in another guy to help him out that would be effective as an interior defensive lineman. And so I made a big trade to go out and get Deshaun Hand. I think he was only like an 81 or an 82 when I got him, and now he's up to an 85 with +2 morale. And so I was focused on getting a guy that can excel as an interior defensive lineman, and that's a guy like this with 94 strength. There's no offensive lineman, maybe a few, that are going to push him off the line of scrimmage. Most of the time, he's going to be getting a push into the backfield because he has a higher strength rating. And then once he gets that push into the backfield, he shouldn't have too much trouble getting off his blocks because he has 85 block shedding. And so he should be a force to be reckoned with on the interior. He should be able to disrupt the running game and even disrupt the passing game because he has the stats to be an effective interior defensive lineman. And then that frees up my edge players in Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram to do what they do best, and that is pass rush and do edge work. And I'll harp on it again. I'll go back to it one more time. You have to know what you're getting with these guys. You can't stick a Joey Bosa into a 3-4 defensive end role because he's just going to get eaten up. He needs to have those one-on-one matchups on the edge, which would be an outside linebacker in the 3-4 scheme or a defensive end in the 4-3 scheme. Because of the way that he is statted, you have to understand the way they're statted. He just doesn't have the block shedding to be able to succeed as an interior defensive lineman. If he were to get double teamed, he would get pushed off the ball easily. Even though he has good strength and he's got good power and finesse moves, that block shedding is going to kill him in the run game. And so that brings me to my last point is I try to have guys that can do both. I generally speaking don't like having guys like Joey Bosa on my team that are strictly just good pass rushers because I like guys that can get off blocks and stuff the run in addition to going against quarterbacks and trying to sack quarterbacks. And so what I do with these guys is I train them in a way to kind of balance them out. And so if you want Joey Bosa to be effective no matter where you play him on the defensive line, stop feeding into his pass rushing abilities and start feeding into his run stopping abilities. And so when I train Joey Bosa and he gets XP and he gets upgrades, I give him run stuffing upgrades because he's already good enough as a pass rusher. He's got 99 finesse move. He's going to have no problems in the pass rushing game. But I need him to be more effective in the run stuffing game. And so I'm going to focus on his run stuff abilities and his block shed and stuff like that in order to get him more effective as an overall player. And so same thing with Deshaun Hand, but in reverse. So if I want Deshaun Hand to be successful, not only just defending the run, which he is currently, but also in the pass rush game, and have him actually be disruptive in the pass rush game, I'm going to have to focus more on his power move, finesse move, pass rush move type of stuff to try and get him up to a point where he can also be effective in the pass defense type of part of the defense. And if you're not doing this with your defenders, you're doing it wrong. And so you can surely focus on one or the other, which is what a lot of people tend to do. But a 99 at the defensive end isn't going to have a whole lot more sacks than a 92. And I'm going to go show you exactly why. We click on Joey Bosa. I don't need to keep feeding into his pass rush stats. Here's why. We go look at his stats this season alone. He has 23.5 sacks. He's already broken the record for sacks in a single season, and he leads the NFL with other users in the league. And we're not even done with the season, guys. You don't need to keep feeding into the same stats that are already good for a player. If the guy's already effective at one thing, which Joey Bosa is, and so is Melvin Ingram. Melvin Ingram has a whole bunch of sacks on the season. If a guy's already effective at pass rushing, start focusing on his run stuffing ability and make sure for all of these defensive linemen that you focus on their block shedding ability, because not only does block shedding tie into run blocks, but block shedding does tie into their pass rushing game. So the better their block shedding is, the better they'll be able to get off of pass blocks as well. So that's the number one thing that you're going to want to focus on is the block shedding stat for all of these guys. But with all those other things that I said, those are going to be the combinations of things that are going to make your defensive line excel or get eaten up in the blocking game. So hopefully that gives you guys an idea of what I do to have a good defensive line. And like I said, from experience, I didn't have what I needed to be able to actually stand up against offensive lines with Jerry Tillery. So I had to go out and acquire somebody to be able to do that for me. Now, there are guys out there that are lower overalls that can kind of get in there and do some of those things for you. I'm sure you guys can go out and find some free agents. And I picked up a guy like Benny Logan as a backup defensive lineman because he can do certain things that I need him to do. So as a backup defensive lineman, he's got pretty good stats as an interior defensive lineman. He's got 88 strength, 76 block shed, which is not, it's not bad. It's not great, but it would be good enough that occasionally I can expect him to get off of a block and help out in the run game and be a little disruptive. And so that's what I'm looking for with these guys. There's a lot of people in Madden that will go and get a Joey Bosa type of player and play him at defensive tackle. And then they wonder why they're getting blown up in the run game. Well, yeah, sure, Joey Bosa is a great player, but he's just not statted well enough to go up against double teams and stuff like that. And so that's what you have to understand. Hopefully this helps you guys out and gives you some idea of what you can do to improve your defensive line and maximize their potential. If it did, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for more, and comment down below what you guys would like to see next. Like I said, this was a viewer-requested video. Hopefully this helped that viewer out. And I'm always happy to give you guys viewer-requested videos and help you guys out with my knowledge of the game and give you any type of tips and tricks that I have to offer. So I'll see you guys in the next one. I hope you have a great night.